Welcome back, everyone. I think we are ready to go, and I think we're going to begin our afternoon session with reports from the two committees that met this morning. Let me start with a report of the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. Regent Bartel.
Thank you, Regent President Pruitt. The Capital Planning and Budget Committee met this morning, and I'm happy to report that in record time we unanimously approved certain consent agenda items, which you have in your packet. I'd like to run through those very briefly. Resolution 1.3.B requests approval to increase the project scope and budget to construct the School of Human Ecology addition and renovation project at UW-Madison, and also seeks authority to waive the process for single prime bidding, to permit single prime bidding for this project. It's a $53 million project to renovate the existing School of Human Ecology building at UW-Madison and to construct an addition with an underground parking garage. Two adjacent buildings will be demolished to make way for the addition. The increase in budget, by the way, of $5 million roughly, will be covered by an increase in the gift-funded portion of the project. Resolution 1.3.C requests authority to seek building trust funds to expand the scope of the UW-Milwaukee campus master plan, and will pay for consulting services to define the 4 high-priority projects that we've to provide a campus maintenance facility and accept a portion of the parcel's value as in-kind gift. About $5 million. It's a $5 million project coming from general fund supported borrowing, gift funding, and a little program revenue support borrowing. Resolution 1.3.E requests authority to seek building commission waiver, again to allow single prime bidding for the UW Parkside Communications Arts remodeling and addition project. This is a complex project which requires a high degree of coordination in the construction of 2 additions, remodeling work on 3 facilities, and construction of a road and parking lot. Resolution 1.3.F requests authority to construct Harvey Hall Theater renovation project at UW Stout. This is a long-awaited project, and it rectifies conditions that are among the poorest in the UW system. This is the only theater venue at UW Stout. This is a roughly $5.6 million project. The increase of $476,000 is due to additional needs that became apparent during the programming and design stage. It's a familiar problem that we have with the extended planning and development process that we use. Resolution 1.3.G requests authority to construct the UW Superior Barstow Hall remodeling project. We'll remodel approximately 13,000 square feet for science labs, classrooms, student and faculty research spaces, and faculty offices. It will be completed through the all-agency program with remodeling funds. And again, we are requesting authority to seek building commission waiver to allow single prime bidding. And finally, Resolution 1.3.H requests authority to construct 3 UW system all-agency maintenance and repair projects totaling approximately $2.2 million At UW-Madison and UW-River Falls, the Madison project will promote energy conservation, and the two projects at River Falls, I guess, will also promote energy conservation by upgrading the HVAC system and replacing exterior windows in a residential hall. 7 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, and I now move adoption of resolutions 1.3 B, C, D, E, F, G, and H.
Second.
The resolutions have been moved and seconded. Is there a request to remove any item from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to request that items B, E, and G be removed due to potential professional conflict.
So B,
E, and G.
B, E, and G?
Yes, and I'd like to abstain from voting on those items.
Okay. So we now have, those 3 items have been removed, and so we will now, if there aren't any others that would like to, that anyone needs to have removed, we will now vote on resolutions 1.3C, 1.3D, 1.3F, and 1.3H. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The resolutions are agreed to. We will now turn to resolutions 1.3B, 1.3E, and 1.3G. Is there any discussion on any of those 3 resolutions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. And Regent Davis has abstained.
Concluding our meeting, Associate Vice President David Miller updated us with a review of the final legislative changes to the 2009-11 capital budget. He reported that the final budget retained all previously reported major projects and funding levels except for the UW-Madison Nursing Research Facility, which had been added by the Joint Finance Committee. And the final budget, as developed by the legislature's conference committee, included the nursing project for advance planning in anticipation of funding in the 2011-13 capital budget. You'll note in the budget fact sheet, which we were given this morning, that this capital budget has 36 high-priority buildings and expected to generate over 16,000 private sector jobs, and will have an estimated impact of $1.6 billion on Wisconsin's economy. So we are doing our part for the economy and our capital spending project. Finally, Mr. Miller reported that we should remain hopeful that the wisdom of our capital planning budget streamlining proposals will eventually be recognized both by the Building Commission and the legislature, and specifically noted that you probably recognize that in 3 of these 7 proposals we're seeking a waiver to pursue single prime delivery method. It is becoming increasingly clear both to the committee and I think also to the Building Commission that this is a delivery method that is more efficient. It leads to more cost effectiveness and creates a better climate for constructing capital projects in a manner that the Building Commission and the university want to see happen. So it is expected that at the August meeting of the Building Commission, another attempt will be made to press this delivery method forward, and we will hopefully not have to seek waivers in the future. So we're hopeful about that, and the rest of the package, I think, may follow along after that. So that is the end of my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Regent Bartel. We now turn to a report of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee. Regent Smith.
Thank you. We first considered the food service contract at UW Green Bay, and the committee approved a 7-year contract with Avian to provide dining services at UW Green Bay. You might remember this contract was originally presented at the June meeting, but a number of questions arose regarding Avian's commitment to the employees of the current contractor, and that we took from the consent agenda and for a fuller discussion. Since that time, I think you've gotten emails or different communications, both from Tom Anders and from, mostly from Matt Shumway, who's with the union. We've learned the following. Just to review, all employees were given the opportunity to interview with Aviance. 21 of 24 non-management staff will be offered positions. Those offered positions will be offered their current wage. Those who are offered, accept, and begin employment will be given a 90-day fair trial period. Aviance provides a comprehensive benefit package, and staff will be credited for all union service at UW Green Bay. At our committee meeting, we did hear from Matthew Shumway, who was the Laundry and Food Services Director of Workers United, and we also heard from Faye Goring, who's a food service worker at UW Green Bay. They focused primarily, I think, on two issues: the process used to determine which employees were offered employment and which were not, and the cost of health insurance. After a lengthy discussion, the committee approved Resolution 12A1 for a food service contract with Aviance LLC at UW Green Bay. Now, before I move that resolution, I want to add one thing that we talked about, that in the future, I think our committee will take a look at some of the particular bid or contract language involving a contractor's responsibility to employees when there is a change in the vendor of the contractor. This is what led us in part to where we are today. I think we'll look at the history, we'll look at best practices, we'll look at how other systems perhaps deal with this, and have a, hopefully, discussion where it's outside of a particular contract or a particular campus involved. I think that's much more productive. So that will be at a future meeting. So on behalf of Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, I now move the adoption of Resolution 12A1.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Regent Drew.
Yeah, I'm going to have to speak against the motion. I believe that the people who prepare and serve the food for our students deserve better treatment than they're getting in this case. I object to the way the RFP was let out. There have been similar situations where the RFPs, I would reference UW Superior and UW Waukesha, where the RFPs were let out with provisions that would provide for a smoother transition for the workforce. So I don't understand why that RFP language wasn't used in this particular RFP, which basically had no provisions for taking care of the workforce. You know, these are low-wage workers. You know, these are $9 and $10 an hour workers who have put in years in that facility serving food to our students. They shouldn't have to face, one, the uncertainty of whether they were going to be retained by the new vendor, and all of them were concerned over this period of time whether they were going to actually have jobs. They shouldn't have that kind of uncertainty. Two, there were at least 2 to 3 workers who were not hired, and there was, as far as I can tell, no objective criteria for why those workers weren't hired, and that should also be part of the process. And I also understand one of those workers is on medical leave, and apparently that was the reason that worker was not hired. And also, it's my understanding that there will be a 90-day gap in their insurance coverage, that their health insurance with the old employer will stop, and they will not get health insurance with the new employer until they've been there for 90 days. So I've got to oppose this. I think Brent's right. We have to develop a better process for this in the future. But frankly, our workers, you know, they may not be our workers, but they serve our students. They're in our facilities. They deserve better treatment than this.
Other discussion? Regent Conley-Kiesler.
Well, I just want to say I'm going to support this resolution. A month ago, we had little to no information about their process. There was an ad in the paper. We didn't know if they were going to interview anybody. Hadn't talked to anybody about salaries. I feel like they've come a long way in the last 30 days. They have offered those jobs, and And maybe it's just a downsizing situation where they just can't afford to have 23 workers and they're going to 21. I don't know what their rationale is, but, you know, they did come through, they did guarantee the same wages, they are doing benefits. I don't know how you tie the hands of every private company and tell them they have to abide by something that was done with someone prior, some company prior. So I think we need to move ahead. I do think the committee has to look in the future at the language and come up with something that's going to be in all contracts or none. There were several contracts, are my understanding, from 2002 until the Superior contract that did not have that clause in it. That it was rare that Superiors had the clause in that all employees had to be hired for 90 days. It wasn't forever. It was a 90-day trial, and then the company could make a decision to keep or not keep employees. So I think we should move ahead and let Green Bay's done a lot of work on this. It was a joint decision made by students, by faculty, staff, I believe. Oh, my person is from Green Bay, but there were a lot of people involved in the decision to go with this company after the decision was made not to go with Sodexo. So I'm going to say we need to support this, move on, and then look to the future.
Regent Winningham.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm very glad I was part of the voice, and I think that almost the entire committee was voiced postponing approving the Green Bay food service contract last month. I think since then, a lot of good things have happened for the workers, the food service workers at Green Bay, and I think they've gotten maybe 90% of what they had originally asked for. But I think right now we're at a position where we stand the chance of hurting Green Bay if we don't approve the contract, even though Green Bay followed all the rules that we have right now. And I agree with Regent Smith in that we need to look at this process and develop a new policy, but I think right now we have to follow the policies that we have in the past and approve this contract today.
Regent Evers.
What are the consequences of this if this resolution fails? What happens?
Perhaps Tom
Tom,
Sanders
right back.
would be an appropriate answer on that question.
The consequences would be, I guess it would depend what the basis was for failure. If there's a specific reason that we could actually go back and talk one more time with Avians, that would be one option. The other option is, can we go back to Sodexo and open it up with them again, which puts us in a very disadvantaged position in terms of setting up any kind of meaningful or cost-effective contract.
Regent Davis.
I want to support the recommendation of the Business and Finance Committee meeting. I believe that the current status is very consistent with the two that have been often cited, UW-Waukesha and Superior, in terms of the language that was being sought and that is being proposed to be implemented with this contract. And I believe, as Regent, I can't see your...
Wingate.
You'll figure it out pretty soon.
Yeah, I will. So eloquently said that we've learned from this process. I am very, very empathetic to the... I think that the way we got here is unfortunate for the people who are affected, I guess is what I want to say. But nonetheless, we are most of where we need to be and consistent with what our most recent practice has been. And I look forward to our coming up with a consistent criteria that can be used for all RFPs, which is our responsibility to give advice and counsel to. I believe, with all due respect to the union, what they've asked for in the most recent correspondence I have seen from Mr. Swimingar is a bit of a reach under the circumstances, and I don't support that. So I would support the recommendation of the Business and Finance Committee.
Regent Smith.
In the past, when you call something like a 7-year contract, it often has a unilateral cancellation and certain notices. Is this one of those?
You may ask that, Tom. Is this one? I think it is. Yes.
A certain
Yes.
period of notice?
180 days.
180 days.
At any time with 180 days notice?
180 days prior to the end of the option period.
Regent Vasquez.
Yes.
I understand all the discussions and everything that's happened. The concern that I have now is the concern about the health insurance. It would be a very difficult situation. It would be a very different situation if we were talking about an instance where it was rather unlikely that we were talking about a new contract where there was no food service or no service provided, and they were going to be hiring employees for the first time. And I can see where a company would have its contract or its policy that says we don't provide health insurance to employees within the first 60, 90, whatever number of days. What is worrisome to me is that in this particular case, we're talking about employees that have been there. The rather interesting thing is that as I understand the discussion, the new employer is willing to give them service credit, acknowledge that they have been employed for X number of years, whatever, and then miraculously after 90 days say, oh, now you're eligible for health insurance. I'm not understanding why the health insurance can't be provided. Would it be because they're concerned about pre-existing conditions? Well, what are they going to tell the employees that finish their 90 days? Are they going to say, well, you know, within those 90 days we found you had a pre-existing condition. No, we're not going to give you health insurance. Of course they're going to give them the health insurance. So I'm puzzled as to why that particular benefit, and considering the cost of health, of all sorts of medical treatments, I think that the UW needs to be at least conscientious about that when it comes to agreements of this kind, that the logic of the employer, of the new employer, not wanting to extend that benefit when it's willing to extend consideration of service and all of these other things is somewhat puzzling to me in this arrangement.
Tom?
Their insurance carrier, they have multiple sites, and they have insurance which basically is going to be consistent at all the sites, and they can't go to one site and say, okay, we'll hold you harmless, because I believe, what I understand, that this is the same coverage that we're looking at with Superior, that there was the 90-day period where those people didn't have insurance coverage either. I would add, it's not. There are other places that have these sorts of limitations based on the insurance carrier of the private entity. And this is, again, a private entity with employees that are transitioning to another private entity.
The information that we had that Tom, I think, got this morning was the aforementioned Superior situation where they had the different language in the bid documents. They did go through the same transition period where the employees were required to wait 90 days for health insurance, and they used COBRA through their previous employer. So this is being, at least what's on the table now, would be similar to what we saw in Superior.
Any additional? Regent Crank.
I agree with the statements that have been made about the need for looking to the future and avoiding this kind of situation in the future, and I think we've all learned through this. I did sit in on the committee meeting this morning, even though I am not a member of that committee, and I appreciated the participation of all those who were there. I thought that was important. I will support this motion. I think the university went through a responsible process that had the involvement of a very significant and important constituency related to the campus, and I think that we need to take action on this for the reasons that have already been said. But we do have a future, I think, that is going to hopefully avoid some of this situation.
Additional discussion? Questions? If not, are we prepared to vote on Resolution 1.2A1?
Right.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Would you like a roll call vote, or are you okay with that?
You're the chair.
I guess that will. I will rule that the resolution has been agreed to.
All right. The other action that we took was on a 4-year, 11 month contract with Pepsi Cola bottling Platteville for exclusive soft drink pouring rights at UW Platteville. On behalf of the committee, I now move Resolution 1282, which is the soft drink contract.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there any conversation, discussion on this motion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. We are now, I believe, going to adoption of the 2009-2010 meeting schedule. A draft 2010 meeting schedule is in your packets. Resolution A would adopt that schedule. I would like to ask if there is a motion on Resolution A. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, a conversation, a discussion. Regent Crane.
Really, Mr. Chair? I just wanted to ask whether, was it 2 years ago we started with a new kind of schedule, and I just wanted to ask whether there was review as to whether people thought this was working, and whether there are considerations that we need to continue to look at. I guess I don't want to assume that we're permanently in a new kind of schedule.
That's a very good question. I don't know if other regions have any comments or thoughts about this at this point, or...
Are we?
Yes, Regent Smith.
Just trying to get, so looking at the schedule too, are we now in a cycle that we're having eight meetings, having 5 in Madison, 1 in Milwaukee, 2 at
Outside comprehensive campuses.
Right. But in that one I see this year is, in that plan in 2010 is that UW colleges are hosting.
Right.
But so the comprehensives and UW colleges would get one about every 4 or 5 years, it sounds like. Am I following that?
Yeah, I think that's basically true. I don't know if it would be quite that frequent, but we're doing more non-Madison meetings than we used to in the past. So.
Regent Davis. We can come back to you, Regent Smith, if you'd like to ponder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I recognized you.
Okay.
I saw him pondering.
What I like about the schedule is the one-day deep dive policy opportunities. I think that really is working. We've only scratched the surface, in my opinion, in terms of the kinds of issues that we can spend this quality time on. So to the extent that the schedule continues to include that, that's my favorite part.
Thank you. Regent Conley-Kiesler, the chair of the Regent Meeting Improvement Committee 2 years ago.
I just want to reiterate that with going to the one-day meetings, that would free up the Friday for you to do your buddy visits. That was part of the rationale to do this. So really, it's not a one-day meeting. It's really 2 days. One day here, and one day you should be off on a campus somewhere. Or at least make sure you get those in the next year when you have your assignments, which I'm sure are right around the corner.
Coming up.
And,
Thank you for that reminder.
Yes, you're
Regent
welcome.
Bartel.
I'm just curious, and I don't have an agenda here, but why did we substitute April for March this year? Is it for our second meeting of the year?
We did that at the request, working with UW colleges, and also there was a thought that we had too long a period between 2-day meetings this year, and it created difficulties in terms of the logistics of getting agenda items.
And the committee meetings and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm. So 2 reasons.
Both good.
Regent Crane, I would also just indicate, and also to everyone, that this, I think your point is well taken, and these are issues that we should continually consider and review, and if there is a will on the part of the board to sort of revisit it in any more organized and specific way, we can certainly make that happen.
The will of the board, as well as hearing from the administration, and as well as campus representation. I think those are important factors.
Okay. Thank you. So, we are back to the motion on Resolution A, which has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. We now move on to the adoption of the 2009-2010 annual operating budget and tuition and fee schedules. I just wanted to make just a couple very brief comments in introduction before I turn it over to President Riley. I think we all know that reviewing and analyzing and approving a $2.2 billion annual operating budget is not so easy. Doing so in this economic climate which we live, where so many challenges are facing the state and the university, it is especially daunting. I think we have talked in this board over the last several months about the challenging time that is being faced today by the University of Wisconsin system. Our campuses are being asked to do more than their fair share in the face of declining state support at a time of extraordinary economic challenges. The initial $120 million across-the-board GPR cut will force every chancellor and is forcing every chancellor in our system to make excruciating and difficult choices. And students will ultimately feel at least some consequences of those necessary decisions. The canceled pay plan increases, together with furloughs, will place new pressures on faculty and staff who are already below their peers. We will need to ask them once again to hang in there in the hopes of better days ahead. We have little choice but to accept the $211 million in GPR cuts under the recognition that times are indeed very tough, and the decisions that were made by our partners in Madison were necessarily difficult ones in the face of an unprecedented economic downturn and the shortage of resources. But I think we also need to be clear, and today is as good a day as any to continue what I think this board has done many times in the past, to make clear to our partners in state government when we say we will be back. And we sincerely hope and believe that our willingness to work with them and to do our part now will be recognized, and that things will, that times will, and when times improve, that resources will become available, and some of these difficult choices will be not necessary to be made. Because I think we all agree that the University of Wisconsin is and will be part of the solution. Certainly the discussion this morning makes clear the vital role that this university plays in economic development and workforce development. We need to prioritize enhanced compensation for our faculty and staff to ensure that we can attract and retain the best to our institutions. We need to have this be but a short hiatus in the state commitment to the UW growth agenda, and we need to ensure commitments going forward to financial aid for our neediest students and their families. Which brings us to our conversation on the operating budget and decisions on tuition and fees for the coming year. In my time on this board, we've made it a priority to keep higher education in Wisconsin affordable and accessible, while also preserving the high quality and integrity of the UW degree. And I know we're all committed to that purpose. And that said, these are obviously difficult times and difficult choices. So on that happy note, I will turn it over to President Riley to talk a little more further.
Thank you. Thank you, President Pruitt. I thought I'd round out this morning's discussion on workforce development before jumping right into the budget with a poem about workforce development that is written by one of our faculty members, Max Garland, at UW Eau Claire. A collection of his poems called Hunger Wide as Heaven was given to me by former interim provost Marty Wood at UW Eau Claire. And this is a poem called Early Work by Max Garland from that collection. My father's milk truck bounces the county roads, as much a part of the jangle of future as dawn. His shirt is white as God to me. I get to ride along sometimes. The smell of the cooler is the rubbery cold where nothing spoils, where rows of bottles ride like music before the choir wakes up, or the pigeons tear loose from silos and steeples. The cords of muscle in his arms, the pulsing star of cigarette, the jump on the waking world we get as we navigate the deep blue stutter of washboard roads help lift the day onto the calendar. First light arrives, slow as a wage. I don't yet know the meaning of. though I feel the glow of usefulness as I lug the empties back to the truck where the sun has started to brighten the fenders and latches, the chrome of the hubcaps like coins for the road, where dark is spent and wealth is milk at every door. Well, on to our discussion of the operating budget and the education of our students and the ongoing work of research and outreach, all of which are very much related to workforce development in this state at all levels. We're addressing today our annual operating budget for fiscal year 09-10, and as Tom Andrews will make clear shortly in his presentation, the budget you have before you for 09-10 is based on the state's recently passed 09-11 biennial budget, but we're focusing on the 09-10 year today. Over a 2-year period, over the biennial budget, the state will require us to cut about $161 million in operating revenue. That's $120.5 million from GPR, $17.6 million from all other non-federal, non-gift revenues, and an additional $23.3 million reallocation from auxiliary resources. Those big fiscal shockwaves will be our focus today, driving many of the decisions about how we form up our annual operating budget, including our tuition rates for the coming academic year. There are, of course, lots of other items in the biennial budget that significantly impact, for better or worse, our UW system institutions. I won't revisit all of those topics now, but let me point to a few key items that have been the subject of various discussions with this board. First, I'm pleased to report that the state will now allow us to provide full benefits for the domestic partners of UW system faculty and staff, putting us on more competitive footing with other institutions and private businesses that have long offered such coverage for their employees. We pressed for years for this right, and we are delighted to have it now. Second, the legislature approved a measure that will allow us to charge resident tuition for Wisconsin high school graduates who are citizens of another country if they've lived in Wisconsin for a specified time and are working toward U.S. citizenship. That's a good thing for the future of our state. Now, a hard thing. The state budget requires us to impose furloughs on all UW system faculty and academic staff. We've moved ahead with a plan to implement those mandatory furloughs 8 days in each of the next 2 fiscal years, which will result in nearly $40 million in GPR savings for the state. We wanted these plans for furloughs to be guided by 4 basic goals. A, they should be legally sound. B, they should be as simple and cost-efficient to administer as possible. C, they should provide UW institutions with the flexibility to accomplish their educational missions. And D, they should provide some measure of flexibility and choice to our individual faculty and staff members who will be affected. The plan that we have consulted with locally, the chancellors with their governance groups, and then I had a 2-hour conference call with the faculty and academic staff reps and classified employees as well participating. The plans that we've agreed to, submitted to OSER, and have now been approved, call for the university to be closed system-wide the day after Thanksgiving in each year, and then in each year to have 3 other institution-wide days designated by the specific campus so as not to interfere with their class and teaching schedule, but so to allow us to gain some energy savings, for instance, on those other 3 days that the campus will be closed. And so that's 4 of the 8 days each year. And then the other 4 days, individual faculty and staff will have the ability to choose their own desired furlough days. So it's, I think, a combination of flexibility and consistency that makes sense for our mission. The state budget also contained enabling legislation that allows our faculty and academic staff to join a union if they choose to do so. This is a very complex, very new topic for most of us, and we're busily analyzing all the aspects of this issue. It's too soon to discuss the ramifications of the matter, but I wanted the Regents to know that we're working diligently to understand how this enabling legislation might affect our institutions and our employees, and to prepare for a variety of contingencies depending on what our faculty and staff choose to do. We will, per the directions of this board, stay neutral on what they should do, but we will fight for their right to choose what happens to their employment status. Again, these are only a few key items from a very long list of provisions in that big two-year state budget. Our task today, though, is to focus more narrowly on the main moving parts within the system's annual operating budget, and if there's a single moving part that will get more attention than any other, as we know, it's certainly tuition. I know that members of this board share a deep commitment to the central mission of this university. That is to prepare to the best of our ability our students for whatever future lies for them on the horizon. At the same time, this board has remained committed to the notion, as Chuck said, that our public institutions must be affordable and accessible. Setting tuition is never a decision that comes easily for any of us. At a time like this, when so many are feeling squeezed by the global economic troubles, we'd love to have no tuition increase at all. In reality, however, I believe that is not an option. It's simply not possible, given the pressures we are under and the cuts we will have to make, not possible under those circumstances to maintain the quality of our academic programs, the quality of our university experience, without raising tuition, particularly in the face of the ongoing declines in state support. Still, I'm proud that in recent years we've been largely successful in keeping our tuition increases relatively modest. For the last 2 years, we have held the increases at our four-year campuses to 5.5%, which is below the midpoint of increases at our peer institutions. Access, affordability, and academic excellence have been the cornerstones of the University of Wisconsin promise to the people of this state, and that's a commitment we want to uphold. While the current budget climate may dictate that we rein in, however reluctantly, some of our initiatives under the growth agenda for Wisconsin, our faith that the growth agenda provides a vision and a long-range plan for a better, stronger future for the state remains undimmed. It behooves us then, I think, to make sure that when the dark clouds pass, and they will, we have not lost all the momentum on these fronts we've built over the last few years. It's our responsibility to ensure that the UW remains strong enough to position Wisconsin to leap ahead among the states in economic health coming out of this recession. That is, I think it's obvious that states will find themselves repositioned in the economic competition coming out of this recession from where they went into it. And we want Wisconsin, through the help of the university, to be repositioned ahead rather than back. So here then is what I'm recommending to the board. A tuition increase for resident undergraduate students of 5.5%, the exact same rate of increase approved by this board in each of the past 2 years. At the same time, I'm recommending that we freeze tuition at the UW colleges for the third year in a row, leaving them at the 2006-7 levels. With the 5.5% increase at the four-year UW schools, tuition at UW-Madison would rise by a total of $617 for the coming academic year. That total, I'd remind you, includes 5.5% general tuition increase of $367, plus the $250 differential for the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates, which this board recently approved after, you'll recall, a very long and very transparent consultation process with students and others. This initiative, the Madison Initiative, is designed, as you know, to preserve the long-term value of a UW-Madison degree and to provide a significant need-based financial aid fund on that campus. I should point out that even with the total $617 tuition increase at Madison, Madison's tuition is still projected to be the second or third lowest among the Big Ten institutions. So this is one area where Badger fans are happy to be near the bottom of the Big Ten, and that standing will not change. With the 5.5% increase, tuition at UW-Milwaukee would increase by $359 annually, putting UW-Milwaukee tuition at 12th place among 15 peer universities. If you approve the 5.5% increase at our comprehensive campuses, amounting to about $280 per year, the average tuition at these UW system four-year schools would rank 31st compared to tuition at 35 comparable regional universities. Tuition for non-resident undergraduate students and resident graduate students would be the same dollar amount as resident undergraduate students, which again is consistent with previous actions of this board. By freezing tuition rates at the 13 UW colleges, we would preserve valuable points of access for more than 13,000 students. This would hopefully attract additional students to the college's low tuition and high quality and keep their tuition more in line with the Wisconsin Technical College system tuition rates for liberal arts transfer programs in the tech colleges. Let's be very clear about something. This relatively modest tuition increase will not spare our institutions from having to do things they don't want to do and we don't want them to have to do. Make no mistake, the next several years are going to be very difficult on our campuses. The impact of the international recession and the resulting budget cuts will be felt all across our campuses in ways big and small, as I've emphasized at several of our recent meetings. Just to remind you, again, here are some of the kinds of things we've said the economic downturn and our resulting budget cuts will force our students and faculty and staff to deal with. For students, these cuts mean fewer appointments with career counselors and longer lines at the registrar's office, for example. For faculty, these cuts mean more students in their classes, less contact with each student. These cuts will result in more vacant positions and higher workloads for the faculty and staff who remain. For students, these cuts will mean fewer class choices and bigger class sizes in the classes that remain, and for some, unfortunately, longer time required to complete their degrees. Faculty and staff will have fewer opportunities to keep current in their academic disciplines and strengthen their teaching and research skills. For students, these cuts mean fewer opportunities for out-of-classroom learning experiences. Our faculty and staff, as President Pruitt mentioned, have already lost the 2% pay increase that they were scheduled to get this past June 1, and they will now suffer an additional 3% pay cut in each of the next 2 years because of the furloughs. We'll be seeing the consolidation and elimination of some degree programs over the next 2 years. Granting that we will have many tough choices ahead, there are other measures I've indicated to you that we will still struggle to avoid having to take, such as double-digit tuition increases, one-size-fits-all enrollment caps, one-size-fits-all enrollment cuts, massive displacement of students from their degree programs, cancellation of teaching days, losing major competitive research dollars for lack of grant writing staff and time, thinning the faculty and instructional staff ranks to the point where remaining overstretched classroom teachers cannot come close to meeting the reasonable expectations of their students. Abandoning our hold harmless commitment to families up to the median income in Wisconsin. To assure that we avoid those kinds of worst-case scenarios, we need to raise tuition by the predictable 5.5%. Remember that a portion of that new tuition revenue is needed to simply fulfill our ongoing commitments. As Tom will explain in his presentation, the remaining revenues will not be nearly enough to fully offset all of the reductions and reallocations called for in the state budget. If we were to lay on the tuition increase covering all of the cuts we will suffer, we'd have a tuition increase that would likely approach 20% a year. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I want to point out that our campuses have been diligent in managing all of the challenges that have been thrown at them in this very tough economic time, holding positions vacant for long periods of time, delaying major purchases, reducing travel, reallocating funds in structural alignments, realignments in both academic and administrative activities on their campuses. So I want to extend my gratitude to our chancellors and provosts and faculty and staff who remain dedicated to the advancement of our educational mission, even when faced with these kinds of significant obstacles. I want to reiterate, too, that things could be worse, though that might be scant solace. Unlike some other public university heads, some of my colleagues around the country, I am not recommending a double-digit increase or massive reductions in enrollment. I think most of you have heard about the dire situation in California, for instance. According to a recent article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, if the currently proposed cuts in state support their pass, the California State University system could be forced to cut 40,000 students, 9% of their enrollment, out of that system. Here in Wisconsin, we're taking additional steps to mitigate the pain to keep the doors of our institutions open in practice as well as in theory. I'm talking, in this instance, about financial aid. At the state level, we've worked hard on what I'll call the architecture of this budget, so that, assuming a tuition increase in the 5 to 6% range, students whose family income is at or below the state median of $60,000 will be held harmless from any tuition increase for the first time ever. Furthermore, under the recently approved Madison initiative for undergraduates, students on that campus from families with a household income of $80,000 or less, $20,000 above the median family income in Wisconsin, will be held harmless from tuition increases on that campus. In both cases, the additional aid would be provided based on demonstrated need determined through established financial aid formulas. In addition to providing funding for this special hold harmless measure, the state's biennial budget provides continued funding for the Wisconsin Higher Ed Grant, or WEG-UW program. In 2007 and 8, more than 26,000 Wisconsin resident undergraduates received an average WEG award of $1,892. In yet another sign of the turbulent economic times, we recently learned from the Wisconsin Higher Education Aids Board that applications for WEG-UW grants are up by about 11%, and the actual calculated awards are up nearly 18% compared to this time last year. It's too early to draw many conclusions from that information, as some students may just be applying earlier than usual, but we're told that the Higher Education Aids Board has now committed more than 100% of available WEG-UW funding for 2009-10. And let me remind you that that Regent Bartel is your representative on that Higher Education Aids Board, and he may want to comment later. Once the fall semester begins, we'll see how many of those awards are actually distributed, sort of like seeing how many airline passengers actually show up for a given flight. If additional funds are available, HEAB will provide more students with additional WEG grants. In the meantime, I'll be initiating a conversation with the governor and legislative leaders to see if there are any ways that we can increase the amount of available WEG funding before the new academic year begins. I want to emphasize again, however, that the new TIG grant, TIG, Tuition Increase Grant, combined with the increase in Pell Grants I'll describe shortly, should allow us to hold students whose families earn up $60,000 per year harmless from tuition increases. Additional private financial aid for low-income students will also be available through the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, founded through the $175 million gift that you'll recall John and Tasha Morgridge made. During 2008-9, more than 600 grants totaling over $2 million were allocated to students at UW institutions from this fund. In the coming academic year, the fund will award approximately 3,000 grants, ranging from $1,800 to $3,500, depending on student need, for students attending public post-secondary institutions in Wisconsin, including the UW. At the federal level, the maximum federal Pell Grant that needy students can receive will increase by 13% this year, from $4,731 in 08-09 to $5,350 in 09-10. In 07-08, nearly 28,000 Wisconsin resident undergraduates received an average Pell Award of $2,667. In other good news from the federal government, the U.S. Education Department just last week announced a new repayment plan that lets graduates reduce their loan payments based on their income. We also learned that the interest rate on new federal Stafford loans, which is the most widely used federally guaranteed student loan, will drop to 5.6% from the 6% where it was set previously. By 2012, that rate will drop to 3.4% for Stafford loans under a schedule mandated by the Congress. There are also new tax deductions for families working to cover the cost of tuition and other educational expenses. So all in all, these are very important, very real steps to ensure that we back up our commitments to provide a high-quality UW education that remains accessible and affordable. Is it everything that our students and family need? No. Have we taken a number of steps at the state, at the private level, at the federal level in the right direction in the last year or two? Absolutely. So with that as an introduction, I want to turn the floor over now to Senior Vice President Andrews for more detail on our proposed annual budget. And when Tom is done, I'll come back for a quick final word, and then we'll open it up for discussion and comment. Tom.
Good afternoon. What I would like to do first is first identify Frida Harris and anybody that may be here on her staff. Frida, stand up. It's hard to envision what happens with these budgets, but between the biennial budget and the annual budget, it's a process that I think now is extended about 15 months. From the initial planning, the development, getting information to you, beginning to create the budget, giving you information last August or last July, sitting down with you, the budget approval and the biennial, and then translating that. It's a huge effort. And the information that you've received in your mail out is there's a lot of detail there, and we understand that. And I'll try to keep it at a nice high level. But one of the things, as you see the detail, a lot of the backup stuff is there are multiple institutions, multiple requirements for reporting. So as you've looked at that and said, geez, how can we deal with all that? We'll try to bring it up a notch, but know that that's the kind of information that once done, that needs to get back to the campuses in a fairly detailed form. We wanted to make sure you're at least exposed to it. So what I'll try to do today is hit 6 topics. National context, and Kevin has hit that at some level, so I don't have to do too much there. Talk about the final information, final feedback on the biennial budget. As we talk about the biennial budget, understand that I'll do something on the annual budget too, but the biennial budget is what we've been talking about for a number of months now. We'll take that, and as you look at it, understand that those pieces are translated into an annual budget. Tuition policy and practice. We'll look at very specific principles that you have looked at, approved, discussed in the last year and a half with the financial aid discussion, and then apply those to the tuition increases, or where there are no tuition increases. The auxiliary services, this is your room and board fees and the SEG fees, segregated fees. So we'll go through those at, again, a fairly high level. And then finally, a sort of a final graphic, just to say, here's what a student is going to pay depending on their particular status as a resident, a resident in a hall, residence hall, and just sort of go through that to see what they're going to pay, highlighting the tuition hold harmless, so we see what that impact is. Okay, national context, 2 questions. What's happening with the state and higher education across the country, and Wisconsin's stimulus funding for the UW system? Again, I think there's probably not, as we look at what's happening across the country, Kevin has highlighted it pretty well. There isn't a secret. We know that all levels of government are in some level of stress. We don't know exactly when that's going to end. There are a lot of unknowns. And as we start to look down for the next year and the next biennium, we have to keep that in the back of our mind. Right now, we know that there are 47 states that are experiencing budget stress. There are an extensive use of stimulus funds throughout the country. That is a positive for a couple of years. It begins to be less positive 2 years down the road. California, we've talked about. Minnesota, the University of Minnesota is looking at elimination of 1,200 positions. Now, 800 of those are through retirements and vacant positions, but they're looking at 400 layoffs. So close to home, there are some pretty big changes. Michigan and Illinois, there are other reductions that they have, but they actually are getting to the point of reducing financial aid. Washington has a large tuition increase. It's limiting its access, reducing research support. And Arizona is, again, kind of a poster state for the problems as it relates to not only state funding, but just general higher education funding. And you can see there, major academic programs eliminated. That's actual colleges within a university. Furloughs up to 15 days and layoffs. Okay, Wisconsin stimulus funding. we're not looking at getting any stimulus funding for the upcoming biennium. That could change in the second year depending on other sorts of conditions, financial conditions, but likely is that we won't. Now, as we begin to look at other states who are using stimulus funds, in many cases they're using it for continuing operating budgets, which means that after 2009-11 is over, they're sitting there with a deficit. And again, I'm sure if you're the state that's getting it, it's better than nothing. But they have to begin planning literally right now as well to figure out how do I, if I'm getting 10 million, 15 million, 16 million in continuing dollars, how do I deal with that? The lack of stimulus, I'm trying to, this is like a silver lining here in a cloud. We didn't get any stimulus funding, and that's a good thing. Okay, we're not looking at a deficit like a number of these other states and campuses are. Our budget base is built on resources that are not one shot or one time. I suppose if we got some money that was for one-shot purposes and we used it for that, we would be happy to accept it. Okay, now let's take a look at the biennial budget. And again, we've seen much of this before. We're looking at general and across-the-board base reductions, base cuts. What are some of the new initiatives? Affordability advances. And again, all of this translates nicely into the annual budget. General and across-the-board base cuts. First, that very familiar $100 million general reduction of GPR. Then we're looking at the $20.5 million. It was the 1% across the board for GPR. $23.25 million for auxiliary services. That's that cash sweep out of the balances. And $17.6 million across the board program revenue. Again, a pretty good chunk of that was also auxiliary services. And the much known and discussed pay plan rescissions and the furloughs. So those sort of establish a foundation for our budget and the planning process that we've been working with. New initiatives, there's some good things going on. Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, the Bioenergy Initiative, the Wisconsin Genomics Institute, increase in recruitment and retention, domestic partner benefits, as Kevin mentioned, UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Science, Public Health, and also we're looking at, there's some planning money for the Stevens Point School of Nursing. So there's some positives. And there's also, again, to highlight, I think, what Kevin had talked about in terms of affordability advances, the Hold Harmless initiative, I think, holds a lot of promise for people. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with WEG funding, but here's something that's quite certain for a student as they're looking at their bills. Again, as Kevin mentioned, the tuition increase grant, the TIG grant, and the Pell Awards are really the key components that allow us to do the Hold Harmless. These are not state dollars in either case, but they are the dollars that allow us to provide the support for Hold Harmless. We're going to be looking at changes in the Veterans Remission Programs. We've talked about that at some length. There's process changes. What we don't know is the number of benefits or the number of vets that may be looking at increasing the benefits. We don't know exactly how the process is going to work between the federal government and state. So there's still a bit of uncertainty, but it's moving in the right direction. And we also have Parkside Superior Remissions. Those are funds available that allows them to attract some non-residents between Illinois and Minnesota in their respective areas to help their overall academic programs. Okay, that's the biennial budget in very much a nutshell, but I think it's the key components. The annual budget, we're going to be looking at the key budget modifications from last year until 2009-10, and then some potential added costs. I think it's going to be important, and I mentioned it a little earlier, that we're kind of moving forward and we're approving a budget, and we're looking down, on a biennial level. But what we have to understand is there's a lot of uncertainty. We can still be looking at potential reductions, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Without going through a lot of the detail that's in your document, and you could probably take a look at A1 and you'd see the detail on this. The point of what I want to do is highlight again what we've discussed as far as the biennial budget and how that links in with where we're going on the annual budget. What you can see here is we're looking at approximately $2.2 billion annual budget. That's GPR and fees. There's 59.6. That's about half of the $120 million. So we can see that biennial budget reduction being halved there. We're looking at recruitment and retention, the increase of $5 million. We're looking at increases that relate to debt service, relates to utilities. The furloughs are being reduced. We'll talk more about the tuition offset when we get into more of an analysis as it relates to the tuition increases. But this is a part of that. And also fringe increases. Now, I've kind of picked various ones to be able to lay out. Again, A1 would reflect all of those. There are other pieces. We've talked about differential tuition. There's going to be increases that relate to that. There may well be some enrollment increases that will be part of that full $2.2 billion. But again, for the sake of a framework at keeping it at a high level, these are the kind of the key components of what happened between 08-09 and 09-10. Okay, what are some of the problems that we could be looking at? If revenues don't come in the state, we could be looking at a mid-year lapse. That certainly has happened in the past, and I don't think there's any certainty in terms of the revenue projections at this point in time. We can also be looking at utility shortfall. We seem to be pretty good shape there, but if it goes from 65 or 70 up to $120 a barrel, we will be back in the same situation that we were a number of months ago and, again, a number of years ago as well, because we keep cycling through this problem. We're going to be looking at potential added costs in veterans remissions. That's just throwing that out there. We don't have any idea how the program will run from the standpoint of what's budgeted. Just throwing that out as a possibility that the unknown right now. The unfunded pay increase. The 2% rescission was taken from all of the budgets, but there are still commitments that campuses will have to pay relative to contractual obligations. So there's still millions of dollars that are out there that they're going to have to identify through their base budget. Tuition policy and practice. Okay, this is, we've been looking at state funds. Now we move into tuition. I think what's important here is what is the connection between tuition policy principles and what we're really going to be doing here in terms of the recommendation and the approval. Why are the increases even necessary? We'll look at that. Increases for 2006 to 10 and comparison to peers. And again, Kevin has hit upon some of this, and we won't dwell on it. One of the principles that, again, was part of what the board has approved is the balance of educational quality, ability to pay, access through tuition, and financial aid. So you've got quality, you've got affordability, you've got access. You've got seeking increases that are moderate and predictable, subject to the need to maintain quality. Okay, you've got moderate, predictable, and again, quality. Seek to maximize financial aid support. Obviously, the hold harmless is part of that. Assume the general tuition revenues to cover regular budget increases over 65% GPR, 35% fees split. It's sort of a technical thing, but the real important part of that is there is a relationship. There is a connection now with the state that's formalized that says they're going to support 65%, we'll support 35%. That doesn't change. And that actually, as piece of what we're doing and as we move forward with tuition increases, is very important. So what principles should be considered when setting tuition? Obviously, quality, affordability, access, moderate, predictable. Given the policy principles, what is a reasonable tuition increase? Well, first, we should probably take a look at why are increases even necessary. And again, Kevin has mentioned at some length why they are at a broader level. When you look at a $60 million reduction, that requires a lot of attention. It requires, we're not raising tuition $60 million. We have other costs that we have to cover. So what we're looking at is a sort of intermediate means of being able to reduce that, and it really goes back to the discussion of quality. We can continue key instructional and support services. We need to limit access, to limit impact on access. We need to look at class size increases, the number of faculty teaching, the number of classes offered. The point of that is that as we start talking about $60 million reduction, as we're looking at some means of offsetting that, these are the sorts of areas that are going to be impacted. These are the students and faculty and staff that will have some downside in all of this. One of the things that the campuses went through in terms of reduction planning scenarios was they looked at, very specifically, how to balance access and quality, cost, existing priorities. They all have sort of different ways of doing that, but that was part of where they were going in looking at their total budgets. Okay, how does this connect to tuition increase? How do we do that? Again, as Kevin mentioned, we're looking at a 5.5% increase. This will be the third year in a row as it relates to Madison, Milwaukee, and the comprehensives. 0 increase last 3 years for the colleges. That would seem to be pretty predictable as it relates to one of those principles. As you'll see shortly, the increases are very moderate on all levels. And again, based on our peers, we're looking at something that's predictable and moderate. Maintaining quality. Again, the same issue. We're going to need some funding to be able to offset the reduction. And that will help us in terms of maintaining some level of quality. And affordability. The hold harmless is actually the key, or one of the keys, in being able to say we're going to be providing affordability for students. Now, it's a limited number of students, but a fairly large number at that. So if we're predictable, if we're moderate, if we're maintaining quality and it's affordable, we're also then dealing with providing access to students and enhancing access. Looking specifically at the comparison to peers, again, Madison 2 or 3 lowest, second or third lowest in the Big Ten. Madison, Milwaukee, comprehensives are below their peer average for 2008-9 with the 2009-10 increases. Colleges, third year, no tuition increase. We don't really have all the peer information yet on Milwaukee, but we're almost certain, based on what we do have, that they will be 12th or 13th out of the 15th. And again, as Kevin had said.
Tom? Yeah. It's Mike. If you added in the segregated fees, would our position relative to our peers change, or do they have segregated fees much the same way we do?
I don't know that we have as comprehensive a database, but they all have seg fees. Now, as we go into seg fees, which will be the next area, what we find out, not only in campuses in Wisconsin, there are choices that campuses make, but I'm assuming that throughout the country and other places that I've been, they really do make different choices. But frequently, you're going to be looking at seg fees that are quite high.
I think, Mike, the recent statement from one of the national associations in D.C. looking at our proposed tuition and fee increases said that when you put the two together, we were clearly on the low side and would remain there in what we were proposing nationally.
So what we'll do, auxiliary services, that's sort of terminology where we'll have our segregated fees and we'll have our room and board discussion. What is the use of those fees? We'll look at segregated fees. We'll look at room and board rates. One thing on auxiliary services to make sure that that's understood. These are self-supporting entities. They're not getting any money in tuition. They're not getting any money from the state. So when we talk about a fee, it's a fee that's there to provide funding independently of anything else for a particular service. There could be a fee. There could also be sales for service. But again, they're not looking at being supported through tuition or state funds. Inflation and cost increases, obviously an issue. Contracts with new vendors. I think we'll be seeing that a bit today as we talk about a couple of the areas where there are increases. Added services. Added services either because of the desire on the part of the administration, desired on the part of the students, a variety of different reasons. Student initiatives, new buildings, facility maintenance. And again, today we will see when we look at increases in the cost, there's a good deal of that, or the larger pieces of that relate to capital construction. Okay, segregated fees. What are segregated fees? These are fees for programs and services such as, and then, running through the various types, health services, rec sports, athletics, parking, student organizations, union, child care, and the list goes on. And again, those are part of the document, and they're listed with each one of the campuses. Why are they necessary? They fund programs and services that support life on campus. And that's a little simplistic, but there are many different aspects of life that are incorporated in this. Key point that will run throughout this is each campus makes choices on the type of service and the amount of fee charged for each service, which is why when we look at some of the variation that we've got either in the room or the board or segregated fees, these are choices that campuses are making, whether it's administration with students be making it for various programs that they have. I think it's a major factor that when we're looking at this, we understand that. Segregated fees. The cost range for segregated fees, when you're looking at these, it ranges from $739 annually for one university up to $1,250 for another, or an average, again, for the total segregated fees of $940. The cost increase range. Parkside is actually going down $72 in the next year. And again, there's just various costs and that they are no longer, either there's trying to reallocate or there may be construction costs that are going down. There's a variety of reasons if you go through that. And then that goes up to $137 and an average of $51 in terms of the overall campuses. Now, again, when I go back to choices and major impacts, the four largest increases that we're seeing here are all related to major capital projects. And in each case, they're unions. If you look at Madison as an example, they're looking at an overall increase of $128. $96 is related to increase in capital construction. Eau Claire, $62.50 overall is $137. You're looking at Stout Union, $50 out of an overall increase of $85. And similarly, Superior, looking at an $80 increase, overall increase is $97. So when you begin to filter in what are clear choices on the part of the campuses and commitments that were actually made some time ago, you begin to take those and make that part of the analysis. We see that they're all relatively comparable. Now, again, as a matter of choices, there may be some campuses that are saying, I need to put more money into health services. I need to look a little bit more at my rec center. I may need to do some more with municipal services that are mandated municipal services. There are many areas where they can be looking at that will differ on each campus, which is why when you look at the detail, you will see that there really isn't a lot of consistency. I mean, there's location, there's numbers of students, resident students, there's just a variety of reasons. But from our perspective, when we looked at the capital construction piece and we started to filter that, they all looked pretty reasonable. The colleges, they have a limited number of fees. They average $308. The increase this time around is 4.4%, and again, on a much more limited level. Room and board rates, cost range, $5,000 to $7,150, $157, average of $5,628. Range increase, $144 at the low, $670 to the high, with an average of $284. Again, and maybe even more so, as we look at the differences that exist here, campus choice. They're looking at, it's part of a master plan, it's part of an academic plan. They are, and they're at various stages in their planning process, where they're saying they're looking at residence halls, they're looking at the size, they're looking at the scope, they're looking at the amenities. They may be looking at the quality of the residence hall and the quality of the meal plan. Do we want to provide a limited meal plan? Do we want to provide more of an all-access approach? And again, costs to maintain residence halls. These are all going to vary based on each campus. And as we looked at these, again, campuses make choices that I think in most cases make sense for their own specific purposes. And as we look at this, we'll actually have a couple of the chancellors, Eau Claire and Oshkosh, will get up and just give a couple minutes on their view of the range, of the increases, why they are the way they are at their campuses, and give you a sort of a closer view of it from the campus perspective. Finally, What is the average increase in the cost for an undergraduate resident? It's going to vary. I mean, quite honestly, $684 for students that are residing on campus, using a mail plan, and not eligible for hold harmless on tuition increase. Those are a number of conditions, but again, only 25 or less than 25% of the students actually live on campus. So we can see how limited that is. $401 for students paying tuition and fees, not held harmless, not eligible for hold harmless on tuition increase. So another piece of that. $51 for students paying only segregated fees and eligible for hold harmless on tuition increase. And again, there's going to be a lot of students. If we can relate Pell Grants, Pell Grant awards, I think we can see in the range of 30,000 students that will benefit from the hold harmless. So you start to add all that up, some of these lower numbers are real. So in the end, I mean, we've got economic conditions at the state level. The last one here. We've got economic conditions nationally. We've got state funding priorities. We've got university funding priorities. We've got comparisons to peers. We can look at a variety of things. We've got input from the legislature, from the governor's office. And frankly, all of those perspectives were considered and part of what we're trying to support today, and really is the kind of the product of all of those perspectives. What I'd like to do now is ask if Brian Levin-Stankevich might come up and talk about Eau Claire and some of the planning and pieces that you've got on your room and board, and then Chancellor Wells will follow him.
Good afternoon. I am pleased to have the opportunity. We seem to be an outlier on this number, so I'm pleased to have the opportunity to come up and talk about how Eau Claire got to where it is on the segregated fee room and board increases. I was going to earlier try to see if any of my other chancellors would take some of these fees and even things out for me, but then I looked at the chart and they all have, some of them have more than we do, so I understand their hesitancy. I want to talk about four things: confluence, consequence, context, and collaboration. Confluence, Tom mentioned a couple of things already. We had two big items come forward this year in our fee structure. One of them is the third or fourth phases of phasing in the cost for debt service on the student union. And this was the first of two bigger increases of $60-some each this year and next year. And that was approved a couple of years ago. So this is a continuing process, and it came due in this year, the $62.50. The second one was we've gone 7 years with a dining plan, and we now had to renegotiate a dining plan this year. We knew that the prices were going to go up just because of the increase in food costs and because of the cost structure of our prior dining contract. As part of our dining planning, however, we're in the middle of planning a new student union building, and as part of that planning, we ended up with a dining services consultant coming in who works nationally with institutions on dining plans. As a result of research that's been done, they've looked at student behavior, they've looked at student eating patterns, and how students spend money on food. And we ended up going with what's we call an all-access plan, which increases significantly the number of hours and the access students have to on-campus dining facilities. Very often students will not eat early in the morning, will eat later in the morning and then into lunch. But after classes are over and they have dinner, they go to music ensemble practice, they go to athletics practice. They come back from that, it's time for another snack. If dining service is not open, you're across the street not only going somewhere to eat, but you're driving, using gas to eat. And the costs are out-of-pocket cash. That's not part of your dining service plan. So the research has apparently demonstrated, and I say apparently because I'm as skeptical sometimes of these things as anyone, that the total cost of what's being spent on food can be significantly reduced by increasing the access, the number of hours students have. And so I think our hours will go to 11 or midnight? 11 o'clock at night, each night. So students will be able to be work in the library, go for a snack, and it's on their card, it's not out of their pocket. So that's a significant increase. If we look at increase in access. If we look at the increase in cost, each year we report to you the most common meal plan that's in place. And last year the most common meal plan was, I think, about $2,200. That was the most common plan, a declining balance plan. If you compare this plan with the 19 meal plan, it's really an increase of about $250. So it's a significant increase, but it doesn't reflect the actual cost that's reflected on our little chart where Lane told me when we won the daily double, we had the highest increase in both charts. I want to talk a little bit about consequences because some of this one-year increase this year is a consequence of what we thought at the time were good policies, responsible policies. If you look at chart C5 on C26, page C26, you'll see that last year and for many years prior to that, UW-Eau Claire had the lowest housing rates in the system. We're raising those housing rates by $100, and I think that still keeps us at the very low end of our colleague institutions. Even though we had the lowest costs in the system, we did have among the higher reductions in our auxiliary reserves as a result of the money going into the financial aid. So we're moving from a save money for projects ahead of time to a pay-as-you-go process, and we need more revenue generation on an annual basis to do that. We've also had relatively low dining rates, and what we have been doing really is we've had our thumb in the dike. During the past dining contract, we ended up subsidizing and cross-subsidizing a lot of costs related to dining, whether that be equipment, whether it be the facilities used by the dining services. We knew that was the payday was going to come due on that one when we got to the new contract, and so in a sense it has. And we've ended up again with a little bit higher than anticipated increase in the dining contract fees. We can't continue to cross-subsidize. As we've looked at these fees, and we've challenged both the students and our staff in terms of fee increases to make sure they're absolutely necessary. When we submitted that to the system office again challenged us to look at those again, and we looked at them very aggressively. We found that we had a number of fingers and a number of dikes, and so we really need to come up with a long-term plan to pay for services out of budgets that are more comparable with colleague institutions. So, for example, there are a couple of areas where our students have agreed to pick up costs of activities and functions that we would have had to reduce as a result of the budget reductions. A counseling center fees is one of those areas. There's 2 counselors that the students are picking up. If you recall the security report of the system, UW-Eau Claire is one of, I think, 2 institutions that was actually providing counseling service out of GPR funding. All the other institutions were providing those out of student fees. So that, again, kept our student fees low, but when we end up with reductions, it forces those back onto the student fees. And our students have been very responsible in picking those up. So the consequences of being extremely frugal and having a policy of not charging more than the actual cost has resulted in kind of a plateauing this year, and then we'll plateau again. We could have foreseen an increase in the dining services and decided over the last 4 years to increase fees gradually, charging students who were there at the time more than the cost in order to reduce the cost for students later on under a new contract. We didn't do that. Maybe in retrospect we should have, but we made the choice to not gradually increase fees just to keep the fee increases themselves lower. The context is that even with a significant percentage increase, we are still at or below the average for the system in cost of attendance and in segregated fee room and board costs. And so our base was lower, and we had a higher percentage increase, and therefore it appears higher, but it puts us pretty much in the middle of the pack in terms of actual costs. So that's the context. The collaboration is that over the last couple of months, we've really worked aggressively with our student leadership to look at where we could forego an increase this year, phase something in over a period of time, Michael Umhafer is here. He's our student government president. I'd like to give him a minute or two. If Mike, does he? Could you come up a second? And sort of tell you what we've been trying to do with the students over the past couple of months. Mike has even given up really his primary campaign claim was to do some work on sustainability on campus, and the students voted an additional segregated fee for that, and he's agreed to phase that in and give that up. So he's kind of given up something near and dear to his own heart to keep these fees as reasonable as we can.
Thank you, Brian. Once again, my name is Michael Almafer. I'm the student body president at Eau Claire. Just to touch on some things that the Chancellor spoke about. This year at Eau Claire, we had over $400,000 of new spending from seg fees through the student government. $156,000 was through the counseling services, picking up half of the counseling staff on campus. Most campuses in the UW system fund the counselors through student fees. Through the budget cuts, we decided we need to start heading in that direction as well. My entire fall was devoted to a green initiative, environmental responsibility account to set aside money for sustainable initiatives on campus. The referendum went to the student body. Over 2,600 votes were cast, and the referendum passed, setting aside over $200,000 annually if passed. But like everywhere else on campus, we have to make compromise. The referendum, we decided in working together to phase in to alleviate some of the increases of SAC fees, and I've been working quite diligently with Brian on this. We've actually been meeting over twice a week on this, also discussing the meal plan, reducing the cost of the meal plan per student over $100, which is something great. We've also worked together on the new Davies initiative, our new student center, and trying to make sure that costs are compromised, that we're worked together on everything. And I just want to thank you for the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Questions?
Brian, do we want to hear from Chancellor Wells, and then we'll come back for questions for all the folks if necessary. Go ahead, Chancellor.
Thanks. Our cats ate my prepared remarks, so I'm short. And I'd like Alex, our student body vice president, Alex Aberstein, to come up to the podium and talk just a little bit through our process. Part of our role is to show that we were in the same position that Eau Claire was a couple different times in the 9 years that I've been here due to projects that we worked on with our students, and so we ended up with double-digit increases. So that we give you a context that it could just as easily be Oshkosh here talking to you and explaining why there was an increase above a kind of a threshold on there. So I'll just turn it over in a second to Alex, and he can tell you about that. But I did want to take the opportunity, because we're talking about how we're trying to control costs to our students. And the research that I see nationally, there's a good question asked earlier, when you look at our total price in Wisconsin compared to other states, we are significantly below the national average, total price to attend college. And when you look at what the board is trying to do here now, at the campus level, when we look at the biennial budget, these are biennial budget numbers at Oshkosh, we started off facing a $12.6 million budget shortfall in biennial. If you approve the 5.5% tuition increase, that will offset $3.3 million of that, roughly 25%. The other 75% will be offset almost equally by the cuts that were accomplished with the rescinding of the 2% pay plan and the 3% on the furloughs. So roughly 4.7 million of the cuts or the shortfall is going to be covered by our employees, cuts in their anticipated salary, and the other 4.6 will be addressed through our budget planning process. So I just wanted to make that point that 75% of the shortfall caused by the budget situation is being covered by the campus. Alex.
Thank you, Chancellor Wells, and President Riley, and President Pruitt, and board. Thanks for letting me speak before you today. And I want to talk about two things, and one is our segregated fees, and then also a little bit about room and board fees. Unlike UW Eau Claire, we're coming in at the low end of the spectrum this time, and I think it'll be nice to get that perspective as well. How we kind of work with our segregated fees, we have a segregated fees committee that's composed primarily of our students. It's important for us to get student opinion and feedback on all issues that we deal with, especially when it comes to financial issues. And when we're dealing with segregated fees, we take it very seriously. Additionally, each of the entities that make up segregated fees have their own advisory council. The advisory council meets and they plan things and they plan the budget, and then that comes before segregated fees. So we're not getting just one look at it. We're getting a few looks at it before we make a final decision on anything. And like I said, both of those are made primarily of students. And we found that our students have been extremely frugal, fiscally responsible, and concerned about any kind of increase. If it's not necessary, we won't have it. This year, we're looking at a 4.5% increase, which is fairly minimal, and most of that is associated with just the increase in minimum wage. The rest of that is made up with some projects that we're having in the future here, our sports complex, the academic building that we're looking at building here in the next year. The Rec and Wellness Center was a reason why our increases were so high in the past, and we're looking forward to having a residence hall as well. But at the same time, we also keep in mind that we want to be environmentally friendly. You know, we're a fair trade university. We take the issue of the environment very seriously. So we try to build all of our buildings and everything to high standards and efficiency ratings. And those small things help and they add up and they save us money. We had, like we said, we had years where it was double digits. When we were building our new Rec and Wellness Center, we were in the double digits. And a way that we kind of plan for that is we look in the future. We plan 5 years ahead. We're planning out buildings. We know what's going to happen, so we can set our fees appropriately for those next few years so that when it does happen, we don't have to take a huge increase at the same time. So being responsible like that, I think, definitely helps our university out a lot. A little bit on room and board fees. Just this past year, we looked at removing landline telephones in our residence halls. That saved our students $300,000. Additionally, we have a new cable contract. That's a 10% cut. That'll save us $30,000. Small fees like that add up, and they save our students money, and they help to keep our numbers low. Again, we work closely with facilities management on issues of environmentally friendly, both with our residence halls and all businesses and things that we're building on campus. So, additionally, our student government is very involved with anything that we vote on as far as fees go. Our Residence Hall Association is very involved when it comes down to any issues that deal with room and board. And I think that's a commitment and a testament to Chancellor Wells and our staff and the commitment that we have at UW-Oshkosh to keeping rates low for our students. So, thank you.
Thank you. Let me just explain to the board. The way we were planning to do this now is if you have some questions for Tom or for the chancellors or the students, this would be a good moment to do that. We're then going to hear from a couple additional people who have asked to address the board on this question. And then at that point, we will move to sort of a formal resolution and regent discussion and comments about the budget and about tuition. So at this moment, if you have questions for any of the folks who have spoken up to this point, let's go. Regent Loftus.
On this slide here, it's always amazing the messages we can send out. When we're talking about tuition, is it correct that the number is $350 for students not eligible for hold harmless, and tuition is $0 for students eligible for hold harmless? Is that correct?
Yes.
It would be a much better number.
Okay. Other Regent Falvo.
We talked a little bit about the non-resident. I think you mentioned something about trying to stay competitive, but we're looking at non-resident increase at Madison undergraduate at 1.75%, and at the comprehensive at 2.2%. I'm just wondering if we have some room there, that if we're going to raise our resident tuitions 5.5%, why not raise the non-resident 5.5, especially in the undergraduate area where we're still behind peer.
Yeah, let me respond to that, and then others may want to jump in. You'll recall that a couple years ago now, the board did actually cut back on the rates that we were charging the non-residents because we were so far out of the market that we had lost a lot of out-of-state students. For every out-of-state student who comes and pays the cost for an additional in-state student. So we want to be sure to stay in the market so that we have enough out-of-state students so that we can capture that additional revenue. That's the revenue side of the out-of-state student picture. The other side, Mike, is that although at Madison we've got now about, I think, 23% or so, Darrell can correct me if I'm wrong, non-resident undergraduates. If you take Madison out of the mix and look at the entire rest of the system, we have only something like 6 or 7% non-residents at our other campuses. I'd argue that that's too low on the educational side. That is, we, I think, want to encourage our Wisconsin resident students to be able to rub elbows with people from around the country at a higher level than that. And when you've seen, for instance, La Crosse come forward with their lacrosse plan, part of the idea there was to help attract more non-residents and still grow the numbers of Wisconsin residents who could get into lacrosse, but at the same time have more out-of-state people come in for the educational purpose and for the added revenue. So we want to be careful, I think, not to price ourselves again out of the market for non-residents because it hurts us educationally, it hurts us financially. And we're not, I want to jump to add, we are not displacing Wisconsin residents by virtue of having more non-residents. We've been adding seats for Wisconsin residents at the same time.
But I'll go specifically to the undergraduate non-residents. We're behind peer in every category.
Tom, do you want to, or Frida?
We're looking right now at the undergraduate non-resident, the cost. Because you're looking at, right now for Milwaukee as an example, it's, I was just thinking over here when we were looking at, it was like 16,000, I think, for Milwaukee.
That's comprehensive. Milwaukee is 16,000 for undergraduate.
Yeah, and I think what Kevin said, it's that same logic, that we cannot go significantly higher than that. We can't kind of continue to do a 5.5% and still have the access.
But they're still under the peer population, double that, because this was like a semester rate by 1,700.
And that's undergraduate.
Undergraduate, that's what I'm talking about.
But, no, I was looking at non-resident.
I'm sorry, yeah, non-resident. That's even more.
Right.
As President Riley said, a few years back, what we found was that we had significantly priced ourselves out of the market with regard to non-resident undergraduate tuition. And we moved to a policy of pricing our tuition at a level that would allow us to fund one resident student's state funding with the non-resident tuition. So a non-res student is paying not only for their tuition, they're also paying the state support costs for an additional resident student. So that is the policy that we've been operating under. We've had a lot of success in being able to bring back our non-res population. We had lost over 900 students from the time, non-res undergraduate students, from the time that we've had double-digit increases in non-res tuition. We've been able to add back about 2,600 students there, and we've added over 2,000 resident students at the same time. This policy is really working for our institutions. What happens in a lot of our competitor peer institutions is that they have the price set at a higher level, then they give remissions and other things. I mean, and so the more we keep the tuition at a reasonable level, the fewer remissions and other things we have to try to compete for those same students. So we're trying to balance that picture. The other thing is raising the non-res undergrad tuition, again, because of remissions, isn't going to bring in huge amounts of money for us to offset the amounts on the
the resident student side. What we are getting, again, is enough from those students now, because it is priced reasonably, is enough for us to cover the state funding for an additional resident student. Does that help? We've tried to look at it very comprehensively as we're addressing this, and we look at it every year to determine whether or not we think we have room in order to make some additional changes. But this is one of the things that we've heard consistently from our campuses, our chancellors, has been very important to them as they go out and recruit for students, is having that price at a reasonable level.
Other questions? Regent Loftus.
For Tom. Recalling many instances when the Board of Regents has been given the statistics on family incomes by quintile, I think is what we usually get them. And recalling those, it would seem to me the rough math is that you've got more than 50% of the students in the system that will have a zero increase in tuition.
We're looking at, if we look at the Pell Grant eligible, which would be the primary, almost the max, I guess, the Pell Grant eligible, we're looking at 30 to 35,000 students. And that would be the baseline. And then there may be some of those who actually are over 60,000, so they wouldn't qualify.
So it's about 25, 30%. Is that about the number?
What was the number?
I think it's about 25 to 30%. No, of the students in the system who would be eligible for the hold harmless. Is that?
Yeah, because, and we use Madison at 80,000. I recall their median was.
Yeah, that may add somewhat to the percentage, right?
So about 25% in the system get no tuition increase?
What we're talking about here is not that their tuition would not increase, but for their family paying, they would not see an increase. So the tuition is actually going to go up, but there is a grant that we can provide to families that have income of $60,000 or less who have need, that will cover whatever that tuition increase is for those families that don't receive a WEG. For those families that do receive a WEG, the crossover is such that they will get the increase in the Pell Grant. And the Pell Grant is going up by $619, the maximum Pell, this year. So while they will have an increase in tuition, their grant aid will be going up by an amount sufficient to cover that increase in tuition. So we will receive the tuition. We can use it within our institutions, but they will also have grant aid to help offset that.
So the practical effect will be that they will not receive the tuition. Regent Davis.
And to that point, I agree with Tom, as in Loftus, that the way that we market needs to include that information, and it should be following along everything that we're saying. So this slide that talks about the effect of tuition and fees absolutely ought to include zero impact on families, if that is indeed for whatever percentage of the families there are, because that's a really good message, and we really ought to be telling it. I mean, every document that comes out of here ought to include that. I agree with you on that, Tom. I do have a question, though, of Tom, Evan Andrews, and it has to do with the whole issue of your theme of campus choice. To what degree does the ability to pay factor in, if at all, in the increases? I understood what Chancellor Bryan said from Eau Claire and the student region. Did I say region?
No, you said Chancellor Bryan.
Okay. we're on a first name basis. Anyway, but I just, it just seems like to me, and I understand the history that led to such a dramatic increase on room and board. It just seems for UWM, Stevens Point, and Eau Claire, I just wonder whether that factors in the ability to pay, sticker shock, whatever, in terms of those increases. They may be justified, I understand that. They may have been agreed to by the students, I understand that. But it just seems like, is there any conversation about impact, sticker shock?
When we get the requests, we look at them very closely, and I think Brian said that we try to be as aggressive as we can in asking a lot of questions. I think in terms of the ability to pay, it really becomes much more localized in terms of them talking to students, looking at what the impacts are, looking at the makeup of their own students. But what we try to do as much as possible is really find out at the lowest level what is actually needed, what's necessary, and try to keep it as low as possible. There isn't a specific criteria, though, that we apply that looks at and says the affordability piece of it. But I think everything that you said is accurate in terms of what really needs to be done and what has been done.
Chancellor Santiago.
Just a couple points. With respect to the affordability, it does come into play for us. Our students' average family income is about $60,000. But if you look at the room and board rates, which went up significantly for us, what's behind that is really capital dollars. We've been trying to replace our windows in our 40-year-old residence hall that in the dead of winter, they rusted out, and the wind comes through, and our solution has been to give our students masking tape. That's how they deal with it. We just cannot continue. So the bulk of the increase is to replace each and every window in Sandburg Hall, and that's one of the major reasons why the increase. We have tried year after year to get state bonding authority to replace those windows, and with no success. So we put it in as part of the operating budget. But the affordability is certainly an issue.
Thank you, Chancellor. Other questions? Chancellor Bryan.
Chancellor Bryan. I'd go back to my point about the consequences of decisions we made. The decisions we were making for the last number of years was based on affordability and was based on keeping those costs as low as possible without creating any artificial increase, even though we knew there was going to be an increase. Of course, we didn't know how large that would be. And I think there's a great deal of responsibility and receptivity to that among housing staff, among our centers and recreation staff, all the people that are responsible for putting forth proposals on fees. As I said, we just ended up with a confluence this year. We're going to continue to go back and figure out ways that we can keep those costs as low as possible. Because it's going to affect enrollment if we don't. I mean, we know that. That's common sense. It is, on the other hand, factored in. I know it's an out, but it's factored into the total cost of attendance in the financial aid office. And so financial aid is based on that, based, of course, on whether one qualifies for aid in forms of grants or in forms of loans, which, of course, are less desirable.
Which is a different issue than sticker shock, though. Yeah, if I apply,
right,
and I find that out, but if I
right.
look at it and say, oh, no, let me go somewhere else.
Well, and I think the other thing behind our all-access dining plan is looking at the actual costs of what students spend on food over the course of a year. And while there may be more on the bill coming in for the dining service, we anticipate and expect there will be less coming in terms of the letter home. Well, it's no longer letters, it's emails home, or text messages home.
No, you're
saying I need another 20 to eat this week.
The request will still be there. Trust me on that.
Parents will know how to respond now.
Regent Crane.
I have a question. Let's assume that, let's assume it for the moment that the resolution passes, and at this point of the summer, and students and families now planning needing to plan and understand what is happening. How is that done? It seems to me that there's obviously needs to be a lot of individual attention paid to students and families, and there's not much time to do it. And with these questions being as serious as they've been in the public eye, it seems to me that I'd just like to know how that's done a little bit.
Well, I think what I'd like to do, if I can take a whack at responding to your question, Judy, is ask a chancellor or two in a minute to talk about how the communications go directly from their campus out to students and prospective students now. But what I'm hearing in general in this conversation is a lot of concern about how we communicate kind of around the sticker shock issue. Because a lot of the kinds of things we've been talking here about, financial aid availability packaged in various adroit ways to keep costs down, are not readily apparent, easily understandable to lots of families. And we are, the chancellors and I, in the next couple meetings that we have over the summer, are going to be looking hard at at cost containment issues and how they relate to attracting students, retaining students, and graduating students. And I think part of that conversation has to be how do we as a system do a better job of communicating what the real costs are. And again, part of the problem is it is so variable depending on your individual situation that you can't send out a message and hammer it home that is one size fits all. But that's our problem. We've got to figure out a way to do a better job around that problem. But more specifically, let me ask if any chancellors want to talk about how things get communicated out once a decision like this is made about tuition at this time of the year. Buddy? Brian?
Excuse me. We've had discussions all along about what an anticipated tuition increase was going to be. So we build those into financial aid projections. When students get notified of financial aid letters early on in March, April, those are anticipated, and there's asterisks all over the place that say it is anticipated this will be the tuition increase next year. If it's higher or lower, we need to go back, recalculate all that very quickly between now and the beginning of the year before awards are actually made. Our fees were agreed to, well, the SEG fees were passed by the Student Senate before they left in the spring. Our dining plan was resolved before the students left in the spring, so returning students knew what those costs would be. All of our freshman parents and students have been through and registered, around 90-some% of them have gone through in June. They all know what those costs are already, so it's not, there are no surprises between now and the start of classes. That was a cumulative and gradual communication of information as we know it to incoming and continuing students on a continuous basis.
Thank you.
Just quickly, just to this, and you may recall that all VW institutions are part of the College Portrait Project, so on our web pages in the front, almost every one of them you can go in and get. Unfortunately, we're not using economist proper terms. It's a price calculator, not a cost calculator. But anyway, there's cost calculators for all of our campuses. So you go in, you can calculate, basically what it's going to cost you. You should try it. It'll give you kind of a rough idea, but you do put in information specific to your situation, and then it's connected immediately to financial aid, what percentage of the students receive financial aid in their campus. This constant effort to get people to understand what the real price will be to them, with all the uniqueness that different people bring to our campuses.
Are we ready to move to, we do want to hear from two, yes.
I just want to say one thing. I just want to echo my support for what was said by Regent Davis. I think we can put all the effort we want into financial aid programs for our students, but it doesn't mean anything to the student that is not even realizing or has the incorrect notion that higher education is out of their reach, and that these financial aid programs, and they're not aware of the financial aid programs that are out there for them. And I think as a pre-college camp counselor myself, I deal with the situation with juniors and seniors in college, where they have this kind of, well, I don't know how I'm going to afford college, I'd like to, and they tell you about their situation, and you realize that they have almost a full ride if they're going to apply for financial aid. And I would just like to echo my support in investing in communication to students about the exact situation of financial aid in our state.
And we do, Regent Wingate, have two big statewide programs now that we can use as a vehicle for that communication. One is the Wisconsin Covenant, and the other is the Know How to Go Wisconsin program that, and again, directly involves more and more of our undergraduates in sending that message back out to kids in high school and middle school and their families about the affordability piece. So we've got the beginnings, I think, of the kind of campaign we need, but it's still just the beginnings of it.
Can I just ask one little quick question?
Absolutely.
Of Tom's, before we move on to whoever else wants to talk. The stimulus thing. I fully agree that we should not take stimulus money that's one shot and have it become a deficit issue for us. But is it really true that we can't find one shot or some one-shot project that we need money for, that this would be the perfect time to get stimulus dollars for?
Absolutely. I mean, if we were eligible, that's what we would do. We would
We're not eligible, could you explain?
No, I mean, the eligibility right now is based on a maintenance of effort calculation, which basically is, if your fiscal year 10 budget, GPR budget, is greater than fiscal year 9, you're not going to be eligible. Now, the governor, having said that, the governor still has a certain amount of latitude in how he would want to use the dollars. But I think in terms of how we would use those dollars, it would be for really a 1 or 2 year purpose without, a continuing commitment.
Let me make clear, Regent Davis, we were not offered any of the stimulus.
I said I must be missing something here. I mean, it can't be. We couldn't find a price. Thank you for that. All right.
Thank you. I would now like to. We've been asked by Nancy Turner, Vice President of the Association of University of Wisconsin Professionals. She would like to address the board on this topic. Welcome, Nancy.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for letting me talk with you today. My name is Nancy Turner. I work as a faculty member in history at UW-Platteville, and I serve as Vice President of the Association of University of Wisconsin Professionals, also known as TAUP, which, as many of you know, is the union of faculty and academic staff who work at the University of Wisconsin's comprehensive campuses, its 2-year colleges, and at UW-Milwaukee. TAUP is also Local 3535 of the American Federation of Teachers, the national union that includes several 100,000 faculty and professional staff who work at colleges and universities across the country, including at many of Wisconsin's technical college campuses. And today I'm here to express TAUP's concerns that you are being pressed to consider an increase in tuition for the 2009-2010 academic year, an increase that will, for all students except those attending the 2-year colleges, amount to asking students and their families to pay more for less. The more I'm referring to would, of course, be what would result for the overwhelming majority of students if tuition were increased above and beyond inflation. However, the less is not necessarily as obvious, which is why we ask for a few minutes of your time today. Because the less results from the state-mandated furloughs that will require all faculty and academic staff to spend between 6 and 8 days away from their work during each of the next 2 academic years. Now, academic staff and faculty willingly work long days, long weeks, and long months because of their commitment to the university and its students. But many are frustrated and upset with the furlough plan, and many, if not most of them, I have talked with about it, say they are likely to truly honor the administration's proposal that, quote, no university business shall be conducted during furlough days. Now, if 3% of the time, talent, and energy that faculty and academic staff contribute to the university is to be cut due to the furloughs, this is, in effect, a mandated reduction in the productivity of the university employees during the next 2 years. There is no doubt, then, that if students face higher tuition bills for the next year or perhaps next 2 years, they will be in a position where they will be paying more for less. Now, system administrators have suggested that faculty and academic staff cut back on research and writing instead of on teaching in order to abide by the furlough rules. However, scholarship is supposed to be the basis for excellent teaching, and any proposal to detach scholarship from teaching is highly problematic, especially in the sciences. Or when administrators talk about increasing class sizes as a means of addressing budget problems, students should also appreciate that they will undoubtedly get less attention from their instructors in the classroom despite paying more in tuition. But returning again to the more part of my argument, students across the UW system have traditionally been asked to pay more in tuition in order to finance increases in compensation for the core workforce of the university system, that is, its faculty and academic staff. In fact, as many of you will remember, when the board considered a change in tuition in August of 2007, a tuition increase that a change in tuition that resulted in a tuition increase for most students, you recruited a small sample of faculty and academic staff to testify about the need for more competitive compensation in the midst of the debate about tuition. Unfortunately, for us at least, during that same biennium, that the administration offered this bait, if you will, to students, that is, higher tuition in exchange for higher compensation for faculty and academic staff, that bait was later switched when a proposed 1.5% across-the-board salary increase that was supposed to have been funded by that tuition increase disappeared in the course of a dispute between system administration and the Office of State Employment Relations. We can only assume that the administration found uses for those funds other than their originally stated purpose. In addition, in our general roles as citizens and parents, TALP members are concerned about the way in which tuition increases have significantly outpaced general inflation rates for the past 20 years, as the state government has prioritized other public services over higher education and has slowly but steadily defunded the university. We do not, however, endorse a system that shifts costs for running the university to students and their families through tuition. In light of this reality, however, of the steady increase in tuition over the past years, and perhaps in the coming 2 years, in our roles as faculty and academic staff on campus, TALP members ask that students and their families be properly informed that the mandated furloughs, if coupled with an increase in tuition for either of the next 2 years, is all but certain to mean that students will be paying more for less. Furthermore, we believe that in order for the university to continue to offer quality education, it is vital that academic staff and faculty have an equal voice with administrators in decisions about issues such as compensation and furlough implementation. We raise these concerns not to be adversarial. On the contrary, we simply believe that these problems need to be exposed and examined if they are ever going to be effectively addressed. Finally, in the coming months, TALP members, as part of the American Federation of Teachers, will be working to help faculty and academic staff on campuses across the UW system address such problems directly through the process of collective bargaining, which, as was mentioned earlier, Governor Doyle and the legislature recently enacted into law. We assume that you appreciate that TALP will now be more able to serve as a public advocate for the university's programs and employees as we continue along the collective bargaining path. We also expect that you will maintain your commitment to neutrality concerning collective bargaining as the members of TALP continue our discussions with faculty and academic staff on the issue. Today, though, let me just want to say I appreciate your time and look forward to future discussions of our common goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. I would now like to call on Tyler Younger, the chair of the Associated Students of Madison, who may also call on a couple of other students to address some issues of concern. Tyler?
Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Younger, and I'm the chair of the Associated Students of Madison, which is UW-Madison Student Government Association. I come to you today with a completely different statement than I had written before I went to bed last night, due mainly to the work of Vice Chancellor Darrell Brazell, and we're very thankful for that, and you'll see why as I go through. What I was going to talk about last night, when I went to bed last night, is the alternatives that we would have to go through in order to address the auxiliary sweep that has been going through the UW system. ASM is being held liable for about $250,000 in this sweep, which is money that, frankly, we don't have just sitting on hand. And so our alternatives that were presented were that we could cut budgets, which would result in about a 6.5% budget cut for the Student Government Association, as well as all 13 of what are called our GSSF groups, or student organizations that receive comprehensive funding. The problems with these alternatives are that they would result in the losses of student jobs, cuts in hours, or losses of student services provided by these groups. Some of these groups do great things on campus, and they allow students to have an experience on campus that they can't really get in the classroom. We have one group called FH King, Students for Sustainable Agriculture. And really, these are just a group of students who like to go out to a farm and plant crops and bring them and give them away free on Library Mall. And in order to make this a little bit easier, they decided that they wanted to get a bicycle cart to carry their crops from their farm about a mile away onto Library Mall. And they were going to order one, and it would ship in, I think, from Canada. And they realized that shipping a 100-pound cart in from Canada was probably not the most sustainable thing. And so one of these students decided to go out and take a welding class to figure out how to build this cart for himself. Another group is GUTS, which is the Greater University Tutoring Service. GUTS is the largest tutoring service provided on campus. It's funded entirely through student segregated fees, and it's really just students helping students get through their classes. And the third one of these GSSF groups is the Working Class Student Union. And WUCSU is the first group of its kind in the nation to actually offer counseling services to students who are of the working class. And so these are some of the services that would have had to have been cut had that option been taken. Another one of the options that we had would be to cut services that are provided by the Associated Students of Madison. And we actually had serious discussions about cutting a program called Safe Cab, which allows students to call any of the cab companies in Madison and have them pick them up from one point to take them to another point, avoiding any of the dangers that they might find in between. That's actually about $191,000 a year. It's used by many, many students, and the decision to cut it would have been very hard for the small group of students that were actually making this decision to make. Because of this process, we're actually going to look into essentially auditing the Safe Cab service and look into getting rid of it, just because it's kind of becoming unsustainable, which is why it was a sitting duck at this point. And our third option really was to increase the segregated fee levy. This would be an increase in the segregated fee levy going on top of $96 that would have gone toward the union building project that was approved here in February, or sorry, earlier than that. And another $250 increase that was going to the Madison Initiative, along with what looks like a 5.5% tuition increase for students this year. It's a small increase that we would have had to pay, but the problem is that it would come out of a group of funds called allocable segregated fees. And if you don't know, segregated fees are divided into two areas. They're allocable and non-allocable. The allocable segregated fees on the UW-Madison campus take up about 20% of the budget, but those are the fees that in the student government and in the student body we kind of hold dear to ourselves because students have a great amount of control over what those fees are spent on. Those fees pay for the student government. They pay for almost 800 student organizations on campus. They pay for the SAFE programs, which includes Safe Bus, which is a bus program that students can use, along with Safe Cab, along with the student radio station, and several other things. The non-allocable fees are the ones that were presented earlier, not on this slide, but earlier on, going towards student unions, health services, child care tuition assistance, and things like that. Today's presentation is not anymore going to be about those things, though. Why it's different is because at about 9:30 this morning, the vice chair of ASM got a message via Twitter from the UW News Service saying, call Vice Chancellor Brazel, something has changed. The Office of the Vice Chancellor found that we are able to pay that $250,000 fee through funds that are left over from the last fiscal year. This is the option that is really best for students, and we commend the Vice Chancellor's office for helping us with this, along with Drew Wielgus and Donna Halloran, who also helped in this. We cannot say how thankful enough we are that this solution was found. It really is the best solution for students. There are some problems with it, though. This is going to come out of allocable segregated fees. When Regent Davis before was talking about how students, whether students' ability to pay was going to be considered in the decisions to raise segregated fees, students are the ones who take that most seriously. And I can illustrate that by saying that the allocable segregated fee, had it not been for the union, for the Madison Initiative, and for other non-allocable increases, would have gone down by $18.53 per student through the course of the year. Because we genuinely audit every single service that goes through our campus, and we look at it to see whether or not it needs to be funded in the way that it's been funded in the past. And so we would have come into here with a decrease had it been solely up to students. This is kind of, one of the problems with coming to a conclusion on how to deal with this is that students haven't had really a chance to communicate on this issue. We were given a spreadsheet 2 weeks ago stating that we owed this money. Actually, we were given a spreadsheet stating that we owed $181,000, and then on Tuesday we found out we were liable for another $75,000. And so when we were talking about student communication and students deciding what the segregated fee levy would be, that process wasn't allowed to play out. And so as students on the campus, we kind of feel a little jilted in that we haven't been able to get together our student council and decide on how this should happen. Luckily, the solution that we did find, it doesn't need to go through council. There are legitimate ways that it can be done otherwise. But the process has been very uncomfortable for all of us. And so I'm here today really to call on the board to hold allocable segregated fees harmless from things like this in the future. These fees are things that are scrutinized very seriously on our campus. Our Student Services Finance Committee, which is the SUFAC on campus, has 2 6-hour meetings weekly to discuss how these fees are distributed on campus. It's a very big time commitment, and we take the time very seriously. One thing I will address shortly today is the increase in tuition. 5.5% increase, we understand that as a university system we have to balance quality of education versus cost of education. It seems, however, that the game has changed, at least on the UW campus in recent years. While we'll be getting a 5.5% tuition increase, the segregated fee increase this year is going to be 14.4%, which is above and beyond what students have decided to pay into this for the coming year. And so with that, I would really like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Thanks again to the Vice Chancellor's office and everyone who worked on this with us, because we found the best solution for students. And I do open myself up, and our Chair Emeritus of our Student Services Finance Committee is here as well. We open ourselves up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Zell. Any questions of Tyler? If not, I think we might be prepared, Tyler, if you want to stay around in the course of the discussion that we're going to have. If questions emerge, Regents could ask you at that point. Unless anyone has a question immediately, Tyler. How does that sound? So I believe we should now move on to a Regent discussion on, and let me, if I may. Daryl, do you want to would you like to add anything to those words of high praise? Do you want to spoil it all now? Step on the story, as we say?
Exactly. Let me just be very, very brief. I do really appreciate the comments from our ASM reps. I really do appreciate the fact that they've been very diligent in taking the time to understand the issue and looking for ways to engage other students as well as administrations in finding solutions. I think we did find the optimal solution. Having said that, we all would hope we would not be in a situation where we're looking at cutting programs and direct services to students as a mechanism to address the state's fiscal situation. But we are where we are, and the situation is what it is. I guess the last point I simply would want to make is that the administration is going to continue to work with our students on campus, and we'll find ways to address this need in ways that really minimize impacts of student services. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daryl.
Have we moved?
That was what I was going to suggest. No, I was going to ask if it seemed appropriate that there be a motion on Resolution B, which is the operating budget, and then if there is such a motion and a second, we would move to discussion of that.
So moved.
Second. Discussion on Resolution B. Regent Loftus.
Well, I just want to say a few words. It's hard to pass a state budget, and in a recession, it is almost impossible. But it was done. Demand for government services go up in a recession. There's more crime, more prisoners, more loss of health insurance, more emergency room visits, more demand for worker training. At the same time, revenue goes down. Every job loss, every business closure, every bankruptcy means less revenue. Yet the state constitution says you have to pass a balanced budget. So we have before us, the state and the university, not only a budget that is balanced, but it has no general tax increase, and it was passed on time so agencies, including the university, can plan. And it makes a major investment in undergraduate education at Madison. It frees on tuition at the colleges. It's a commitment to veterans. There are still 2 wars going on, and there's an amazing commitment to veterans in here. Students of middle-class families have no net tuition increase. There's no caps on enrollments. There's no massive layoffs. On the other hand, there is a massive building program approved that provides jobs, saves energy, and is an investment in the future in many campuses. We heard this morning the School of Human Ecology, with their building improvement, they will be able to increase not only programs, but students and graduate students by 16%. And I think that is reflected throughout the program. So I don't think the sky is falling. On the contrary, I think that we've got something here to hold the course, and that there will be a bright future.
Thank you. Other discussion? Regent Conley,
I just want to say I think the staff, Kevin, you and your staff and the chancellors have done a great job in a really difficult situation. I thought it was going to be so much worse than 5.5. I was quite relieved. That's all we're at, and not a double digit. And looking at what other states have had to do, I think Wisconsin should feel very good about this, and we should move to pass this.
Thank you. I would just reiterate what Chancellor Wells said about his figure of 75% of the budget shortfall has been covered by things other than this proposed tuition increase, which I think is a very meaningful. Regent Crane.
I too think that the right balance, a difficult balance, admittedly, has been struck, and that it's not just a matter of quality education, but also of access, of number of places that there are for students. And I think that for those reasons, this is a budget we must support.
Regent Vasquez.
Later this month, we're having a little family reunion, and I will have to face my brother-in-law, who has a son in Oshkosh, and a daughter in Madison, and my sister-in-law has a son in Oshkosh. And they immediately contacted me when the newspaper articles were coming out. And I do feel very comfortable that I am looking forward to that family reunion and be able to very satisfactorily explain to them why we need to take the action that we do need to take. So in a personal sense, it became personal for me hearing from my relatives about this. I do feel that all the things that Regent Loftus just mentioned exactly are true, that when these times are difficult, it's the demand for public services is just tremendous. But I think that we are responding in a very responsible way, and I am going to be in support of the budget.
Thank you. Regent Opkin.
Before I talk, I was trying to write the things that President Riley was saying, how the cuts have affected students, and I just was wondering if we could hear that list of things, that the ways that students are affected by the cuts that we received. I think it started off with fewer appointments with counselors and
Page 6. No.
I was trying to get them all down.
And again, I want to emphasize, Regent Opkin-North, that these are just examples of things that have happened or are very likely to happen. We could, go on for a much longer time if we tried to put a comprehensive list. But some of the things I mentioned were these. For students, these cuts mean fewer appointments with career counselors and longer lines at the registrar's office, for example. For faculty, these cuts mean more students in their classes and less contact with each student. These cuts will result in more vacant positions and higher workloads for the faculty and staff who remain. For students, these cuts will mean fewer class choices and bigger class sizes, and for some, longer time required to complete their degrees. Faculty and staff will have fewer opportunities to keep current in their academic disciplines and strengthen their teaching and research skills. For students, these cuts mean fewer opportunities for out-of-class learning experiences. Our faculty and staff have already lost the 2% pay increase scheduled for this past June 1, and they will now suffer an additional 3% pay cut in each of the next 2 years because of the furloughs. We'll be seeing the consolidation and elimination of some degree programs over the next 2 years. Those are some of the kinds of things I mentioned. And I went on. I want to add to mention a number of other things that we hoped if we got the 5.5%, we could avoid having to do beyond those.
Regent Hopkins. And I guess that, one thing that I want to say is that I really do want to applaud system administration for coming up with a reasonable number for a tuition increase. And I think that that 5.5% is a reasonable number. But on the other hand, I don't think it's not that I don't support what system administration is doing, but I think it's important, one, to remember that every time we raise tuition, and I know that everyone knows this, we price people out of higher education, and that's something that is very important to me. And I think that for me as a student to be here on this board, I would like, the reason why I asked you to repeat those is so that we can all hear that message of what kind of devastation these kind of cuts do to the students on campus, whether we increase tuition or not. These activities that were named off are still going on, and the quality of our institutions is still going down. I guess that's what I really wanted to point out.
Can I just say, Kevin, we share that concern, and part of our response, certainly a major response, I hope, to the concern about pricing students out is that students whose family incomes are up to the median family income in the state will not have to pay that 5.5% tuition increase.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to share some remarks that I have over the operating budget situation. Well, this is my first decision of great significance on this board. It's been quite a way for the governor to throw me into this. So thank you if you're watching.
We've been there too.
This is a decision that I have not taken lightly, and I have been preparing for this decision almost since I have been appointed. I visited many campuses and solicited advice and perspectives from student leaders and communities across the institutions. And the opinions that I've gotten back have been very varied. Some students have urged me to protect the quality of their education, while others have stressed the importance of low tuition levels. And I'm sure that these are sentiments that we all share on this board. And I have included these concerns in my decision. I believe that the UW system is a great value. I think the investment made by students have substantial returns. What gives me great concern are cases where students are excluded or discouraged from even making this investment, either by students getting the false notion, as I mentioned before, that college is out of their reach, or by financial aid packages that don't even provide enough in loans, much less in grants, that would cover actual need. I would just like to say that I am very committed to helping find answers to these problems. To speak to the tuition increase, I am a first-generation college student who has had to find ways to pay for my own education. I know how much of a burden this can be, but I realize how tuition levels are very reactionary to the budget set forth by the state. In this climate of declining state support, we are really left with two choices: either charge more or do less. And I believe we have to find a balance between these two. As a student, I would cheer if the responsible decision was a tuition freeze, as would a lot of students that have it much worse than I do. But where I am sitting today, If I make that decision, I have a set of consequences I have to address. I would have to ask myself, how many faculty am I then willing to let go? Or how many programs am I willing to close? Or how many high school seniors am I willing to deny a seat in higher education? This makes it a much more complicated decision, and I believe that we need to find a balance between access and quality. Recognizing the financial crisis we are in, I believe this budget does a reasonable job of spreading this burden across the UW system to faculty, students, and programs alike. Hopefully this will maintain the quality of our institutions. In addition, this budget speaks to the importance of access through the hold harmless piece and the tuition freeze at the UW colleges. And I am committed to doing more to support access because there's a lot that we lack in our institution. Now, when I look at this vote, I could use this vote to make a symbolic gesture and vote no and make the point that the burden has been placed on the students for too long, which it has, and I think is an important point to make. So when I vote to make a point, even though I may see the need for this budget to pass, I could vote just to make this point. But I've thought about it a lot, and I feel that I have to vote as if my decision determined this outcome. If I was sitting here alone, would I turn this budget back? This was a very hard decision for me to make, but I've done my work, and at the end of the day, I have to vote my conscience. And I know that this budget isn't perfect, but in the end, I feel it is the responsible way to move the UW system forward. So, at that, I'd like to encourage any more student comments on this issue if there is anybody sitting out there that would like to say something, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Other discussion, comments? If not, are we moving forward to being prepared to vote on this? We have a Resolution B in front of us on the 2009-10 operating budget. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The motion has carried. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.